there's this idea that people like to talk about, and I think that there's actually a little bit of truth to it, so I'm not trying to totally talk it down. I'm just saying that I think maybe it's a little bit overblown in a lot of senses. And I'm going to talk about that idea, the idea of unequal justice, today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. Hi, and welcome aboard. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and I'm glad to have you aboard today. Today is Saturday, the 13th of March of 2021. Welcome if you're coming on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Thank you for joining me this morning, and hopefully, or today, whatever it happens to be for you by the time you actually get a chance to see this. Hopefully you'll find something useful and interesting in what I have to say. But all of that said, I kind of want to get into the meat and potatoes of what I'm talking about, obviously. So the thing is this. Is there this idea, you could argue, of unequal justice? And I'm going to say that this is sort of a multi-part question, right? Somebody brought up this idea. They said, look, if you go to this college, this university campus, you've got kids who everybody knows are using drugs and nobody's doing anything about it. And then if you go to this nearby town, near that college campus, you've got people who are being busted for drugs every day. Everybody's paying attention to it, and they all consider it important and necessary for that to happen. People consider it important and necessary for that to happen. Well, I agree that there's some disparity there, but I want to point a couple of things out that I think are important. The first thing is this. If you go to the college campus, what you're going to find is a bunch of kids who are going to school every day, doing their little thing, not really typically bothered much of anybody else. I'm not saying there's no crime at all, but the incidence of crime is quite low on the university campus in all likelihood. And the result is that people don't look at a university campus as a hotspot for crime, regardless of the type. And that doesn't mean that people, if there are laws against drug abuse, and there are, that people shouldn't be concerning themselves with drug abuse on college campuses. But it does mean that people don't put a priority on that kind of activity on a college campus as a rule, not unless that college campus starts to be a place that's a hotbed of crime. Now, I don't know about the towns that are near the colleges, but I know this. I know that in lots of towns, if you go to Detroit, if you go to Chicago, if you go to New York City, right, you will find that there's this comparatively very large incidence of crime. And I'll just tell you, this is not a surprising thing. When you mange a whole bunch of people together in one place, that's probably going to happen. You can probably just count on that being the case. But the point is, people inside and outside of the various communities that are affected make it their business to point out that the crime exists and to ask people to do something about it. Does that happen on college campuses to the same sort of degree? Not at all. Not at all. And so the first thing that you have to realize is that when people look at what needs to be done, they look at what needs to be done in a college campus, which is just typically a bunch of people who come together for a period of time, a semester, a term, whatever it happens to be, and then they leave again. And they look at that and they go, and again, they look at the amount of criminal activity that's occurring on that campus and the types of criminal activity that's occurring on that campus. And by the way, excuse me, my son is, as usual, on a Saturday morning is being noisy in the background. He's trying to watch the stuff that he likes to watch on Netflix, and I can't really blame him. He gets into it. Anyway, the point I'm making is this, the first point that I'm making. You need to understand, you need to realize that when you look at those two environments, when you look at college campuses and when you compare them to other cities and so forth, you will find that the dynamic in those places is different and that the levels and types of criminal activity that occur in each place is different. As a result, the way the laws are enforced is different. Now, again, am I saying that means that you should let students on college campuses do drugs? No, I'm not saying that. I think they should, crack down on that just as much in those communities as any other. And I do think that it's wrong that they're not, if you want me to be quite plain on that. I do. That having been said, though, I understand why it is that when you look at a big city or even a small city that has a crime problem, here in Arkansas, there's a city, Pine Bluff, and Pine Bluff is known to have a lot of criminal activity, and the result is that there's a lot of law enforcement activity, or has tended to be a lot of law enforcement activity there. Little Rock has criminal activity, and the result is that we tend to have a lot of law enforcement activity here. Here's the thing, though. We've looked at the idea. Okay, so before we step away from this, let's say one more thing. One important point is that the way American government was supposed to be designed, and it seems to be working okay in this sense where law enforcement is concerned, is laws were supposed to be generated at the lowest possible level. Now, what that means in part is that you're going to see differences in law enforcement between different municipalities, between one city and another, between one city and a town, between backwoods places and not places that aren't backwoods. You're going to see differences in law enforcement in terms of the laws. And I don't want, you'll forgive me for saying so, or you won't, it's up to you, I don't want the same laws that New York City has for multiple reasons, right? One, because of the logistics of living in New York City are different than the logistics of living in Little Rock, Arkansas. But two, because I think that there are people making the laws in New York City who, you'll forgive me for saying so, are just a little bit Looney Tunes. And I don't want them making the laws for my little neck of the woods. Okay, now the other consideration that I wanted to bring up was this. One of the ways in which people tend to talk about unequal law enforcement is to say, if you're black, you're going to be more likely to suffer enforcement actions than if you're white. Now, everything that I know says that's not true. Everything I know says that if you look on a per capita basis, you will find that roughly the same number of white folks get pulled over for traffic violations. Roughly the same number of white folks get gigged for drug enforcement actions. And, you may find that there are more people who are performing criminal actions. But the point is, as a rule, you will find that people are being treated basically the same way. And if you look at the circumstances for, say, a murder or whatever, you will find that two people, whether they're black or white, one black and one white, whatever, probably will get roughly the same sentence if mind you, the way that things happened was roughly the same. Now there's the class idea. There's the idea that instead it's class-based. There's actually something to this. Why? Because it's considered something you don't do to rob people in the street in nicer neighborhoods. Now, does that mean that they don't rob people other ways? No, it doesn't mean that. I'll say this about that. I think that should be enforced every bit as much. In fact, sometimes it's even more harmful because they rob more people, to be fair. But that having been said, okay, it's often harder to find the guy who does a Ponzi scheme and to bring that person to justice than it is to find the guy who's taken his steel blue bank book and going and robbing banks. It's often harder to find that person. That's not an excuse. I think we need to go looking, and I think we need to deal with that. But it is harder to do, which means you're probably going to see a much lower prosecution rate for that kind of people as a rule. Again, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be prosecuted. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't be going after them, but it means that you're going after a different class of people. So if you start saying, well, there are more people prosecuted for robbery in inner cities, and more of those people are black than are prosecuted in genteel townships for the same sort of thing, I'll go, yeah, that's probably true. But the reason for that is they're doing different kind of crimes in the uppity muckety muck places. All right, now I'm about out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up now. I hope you get basically the idea of what I'm saying. Yes, there is some sort of disparity. No, it's not based on the things that I think a lot of people think that it's based on, and that's an important consideration and realization. So that's kind of what I was trying to get across today. That's why I did what I did. Again, today is Saturday, the 13th of March of 2021. Tomorrow will be Sunday, the 14th, obviously, of March of 2021. Thanks again to everybody who's joined me on Rumble, the podcast, and YouTube. Thanks for watching all the way through the video. Remember, you can like my videos on YouTube. You can always subscribe, as I say in the end piece. You can give me a positive Rumble on Rumble if you want to do that. I'm doing pretty good on Rumble. Still haven't busted the 10,000 total video views mark. Over 200, definitely over 200 subscribers on, or followers, whatever you want to call it, on Rumble. Wish I could do that on YouTube, but I don't see that happening. The subject of today's little piece has been unequal justice. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the differences between debt and deficit, and how it is, why it is that deficit is such a problematic thing in the minds of so many people. Hope that you're having a good day today. Hope that it continues to go well for you, and that your weekend is a good one. And hopefully we will see you again. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Saturday, March the 13th of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.